I stood at my mother's doorstep, watching her hands tremble as she held the eviction notice. Her perfectly manicured nails, the ones she'd always been so proud of, were now chipped and bare. She looked up at me with eyes I'd never seen before. Empty, desperate, broken. "You did this," she whispered. "You sent those documents. You destroyed us." I tilted my head, studying her the way she used to study me when I was nothing but an inconvenience in her perfectly curated life. "No, Mom. I just stopped pretending it never happened." Behind her, I could see the shell of what used to be their pristine home. Boxes stacked in corners, furniture covered with sheets, the smell of decay and desperation thick in the air. My father's favorite armchair sat empty, a court document resting on its arm. "Pending investigation," it read. She grabbed my wrist, her grip weak and pathetic. "Your father could go to prison. Everything we built. Everything you built on lies," I finished for her. My voice was calm, almost gentle. That's what scared her most, I think. The fact that I wasn't screaming, that I wasn't crying, that I had become exactly what she'd trained me to be. Cold, detached, efficient. If you're still listening, if you want to hear how a daughter who gave everything became the architect of her own family's downfall, hit that like button and subscribe. Because this story, it gets darker before it gets better. Drop a comment if you've ever loved someone who never learned how to love you back. Let me take you back to where it all started. To the moment my world stopped spinning and theirs kept rotating without missing a beat. The hospital corridor smelled like industrial cleaner and death, that specific combination that only exists in places where hope goes to die. I'd been standing outside the ICU for what felt like hours, but the clock on the wall told me it had only been 43 minutes. 43 minutes since they'd rushed my 3-year-old son behind those double doors. 43 minutes since I'd last heard his voice, weak and scared, calling for me. Meningitis. The doctor had said it with the kind of practiced sympathy that told me he'd delivered this news before, too many times. It came on fast. "We're doing everything we can," but I could see it in his eyes. The doubt, the probability calculations running behind his professional mask. I'd called my parents from the ambulance. My hands had been shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. "Mom, it's Ethan. He's really sick. We're going to County General. I need you." There had been a pause, long enough that I'd thought the call dropped. Then Eleanor's voice, crisp and annoyed. "Lily, it's Saturday. We have the Peterson brunch. Can't this wait until Monday? He might be dying." My voice had cracked on that word. Dying. I'd never said it out loud before. Never let that possibility take shape in the air between us. Another pause. "Fine. We'll come by after brunch. Don't be hysterical. Children get sick all the time." They'd arrived 3 hours later, dressed in their brunch best. Bob wore a navy blazer and khakis, like he was attending a golf tournament rather than a hospital vigil. Eleanor's pearls caught the fluorescent light, creating little rainbows on the sterile walls. They'd brought their phones, their perfect composure, and absolutely nothing that resembled concern. The monitor's steady beep had been my anchor, the only thing telling me he was still here, still fighting. I'd memorized the rhythm of it, the way sailors memorize the patterns of waves. Beep, beep, beep. Each one a small victory, a moment of not yet, not yet, not yet. I'd watched the nurses come and go through the small window in the ICU door. Watched them check tubes and adjust machines and scribble notes on clipboards. One of them, a young woman with kind eyes and tired scrubs, had caught me looking and given me a small, sad smile. That smile had terrified me more than anything else. My parents sat on a bench at the end of the hallway, about 50 feet away. Close enough to say they'd come. Far enough to avoid any actual involvement. Bob had pulled out his phone within minutes of arriving and started a video call with my sister Chloe. I could hear fragments of their conversation floating down the corridor. "The Bahamas sound perfect for Thanksgiving," Bob was saying, his voice warm and animated in a way it never was when he spoke to me. "Book it. We'll make it a family trip." "What about Lily?" Chloe's voice crackled through the speaker. "What about her?" Eleanor had interjected, not looking up from her own phone where she was scrolling through what looked like real estate listings. "She'll be fine. She always is." I'd stood there, 15 feet from my dying child, listening to my family plan a vacation, and something inside me had started to crack. Not break. Not yet. Just crack. Like ice on a frozen lake when the temperature starts to rise. Then the monitor changed. That steady beep, my lifeline, my prayer, transformed into a single, unending tone. The sound of nothing. The sound of everything ending. The nurses erupted into motion behind the window. I saw their mouths moving, their hands working, the urgent choreography of people fighting death. But I couldn't hear anything except that tone, that terrible, endless tone. I don't remember moving, but suddenly I was at the door, my palms flat against the glass, watching them try to bring him back, watching them fail. Watching the exact moment when they stopped trying and looked at each other with that look, the one that says, "There's nothing more we can do." The young nurse, Maria, came out first. Her eyes were red and wet, tears streaming down her face for a child she'd known for less than 4 hours. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. She didn't need to say anything. I knew. Every cell in my body knew. My legs buckled. I don't remember my knees hitting the floor, but suddenly I was there, hands pressed against the cold linoleum. A sound came out of me that I didn't recognize. Not a scream, not a cry. Something deeper. Something that started in my chest and came out broken. It was the sound of understanding something your mind refuses to accept. The sound of every tomorrow you'd planned disappearing in a single moment. No, 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 please God, no, this isn't happening, this can't be happening, please. Please, please. The words tumbled out in a stream, meaningless syllables that couldn't change anything, couldn't bring him back, couldn't undo the last 43 minutes. I crawled toward the door, because walking was impossible, standing was impossible, anything except getting closer to him was impossible. Maria knelt down beside me, trying to catch me, trying to hold me up, but I was beyond holding. I was coming apart at the seams, unraveling in real time. "I'm so sorry," she kept saying, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry." At the end of the hallway, about 50 feet that might as well have been 50 miles, my parents remained seated. Bob was still on his video call, though his voice had gotten quieter. Eleanor had set down her phone, but she hadn't stood up, hadn't moved, hadn't so much as turned her head toward the commotion. I screamed their names, not called, not shouted. Screamed, with everything left in my destroyed lungs. "Mom, Dad, he's gone, Ethan is gone, my baby is gone." Eleanor looked up from her phone with the expression of someone who'd just been informed of a flight delay, mild annoyance, slight inconvenience. She glanced at Bob, who ended his video call but didn't stand. They exchanged a look, some kind of silent communication that I couldn't decode from my position on the floor. Eleanor stood first, smoothing down her cream-colored blazer with careful precision. She picked up her designer handbag, checked her reflection in the window, and then, only then, began walking toward me. Not quickly, not with any sense of urgency. She walked the way you'd walk to check on a pot that might be boiling over, necessary but tedious. She stopped about 3 feet away from me, careful to stay out of reach. "Lily, stop making a scene." I stared at her, my vision blurred with tears and disbelief. "What?" "You heard me. Get up off the floor. People are staring." She glanced at Maria, then at the other nurses who had gathered near the ICU door. "This is exactly the kind of behavior that got you into this situation in the first place." I couldn't comprehend the words coming out of her mouth. They seemed to be in English, seemed to be arranged in grammatically correct sentences, but they made no sense. "No sense at all. What are you talking about? My son just died." "Because you made poor choices," Eleanor said, her voice as cool and clinical as the hospital air. "You chose to get involved with that man. You chose to have a child you clearly weren't equipped to handle. You chose to live in that terrible apartment with no health insurance. And now you want to throw a tantrum because choices have consequences?" Bob had joined her now, standing slightly behind her shoulder like a bodyguard. His face was carefully blank, practiced neutrality. "Your mother's right, Lily. This isn't helping anyone. The nurses have work to do. You're making their job harder." Maria stood up slowly, her expression shifting from grief to shock to something that looked like anger. "Sir, her son just passed away. She has every right to." "We're her parents," Eleanor cut her off sharply. "We'll handle this. Thank you for your concern, but it's really none of your business." I tried to stand, using the wall for support. My legs felt like they were made of water, like they might give out at any second. "Please," I heard myself say, hating how small my voice sounded, how weak. "Please don't leave. I can't do this alone. I need my mom. I need you." Eleanor took a step back, as if my pain might be contagious. "You need to learn to handle things yourself. You're 32 years old, Lily. You can't keep running to us every time life gets difficult." My son died. I was sobbing now. Ugly, choking sobs that made it hard to breathe. "This isn't just difficult. This is impossible. Please, Mom. Please just hold me." "Just for a minute." For a brief second, I saw something flicker across her face. something that might have been hesitation, or regret, or the faintest echo of maternal instinct. But then it was gone, replaced by that familiar wall of ice. We did what you asked. We came to the hospital, but we're not going to stand here and watch you fall apart. She looked at Bob. We should go. Chloe needs us to look at those property documents tonight. I grabbed at her sleeve, desperate, beyond pride or dignity. Mom, please. Please don't go. Don't leave me here alone with this. She pulled her arm away sharply, checking to see if I'd wrinkled the fabric. You're always alone, Lily. That's just who you are. You've never needed us before. You'll be fine. Bob adjusted his blazer. She's right. You're stronger when you handle things on your own. You always have been. Eleanor picked up her handbag again, a clear signal that the conversation was over. She's used to being alone, Bob. She always figures it out. Let's go. No, wait, please. I reached for her again, but she was already walking away, her heels clicking on the linoleum floor with rhythmic finality. Bob followed, pulling out his phone to presumably resume his call with Chloe. I stood there, swaying on unsteady legs, watching them walk away. Watching my parents abandon me at the worst moment of my life with the same casual indifference they'd show to leaving a mediocre restaurant. They didn't look back, not once. Maria was beside me again, her hand gentle on my elbow. Come on, let's sit down. Let me get you some water. They left, I said, my voice flat with shock. They just left. I know. Her voice was soft, heartbroken. I'm so sorry. She guided me to a chair and sat down beside me. She didn't try to make it better with empty platitudes or false hope. She just sat there, a complete stranger, offering me the basic human compassion my own parents couldn't manage. We sat in silence for a long time. Eventually, a doctor came to talk to me about arrangements, about forms that needed to be signed, about decisions that had to be made. Maria held my hand through all of it, translating medical jargon into something I could understand, helping me navigate the bureaucracy of death. When it was time to leave, when there was nothing left to do, Maria walked me to my car. Do you have someone you can call? She asked. A friend? A relative? I thought about my contact list. Chloe, who'd probably already heard about Ethan's death and hadn't bothered to text. A few acquaintances from work who I barely knew. My ex, Ethan's father, who'd left when I was 6 months pregnant and never looked back. No, I said. There's no one. She pulled out her phone. I'm giving you my number. If you need anything at all, you call me, okay? I took her number, knowing I'd never use it, knowing I'd never let anyone see how broken I really was. Thank you. I drove home in a daze, operating the car on autopilot while my mind replayed the last 4 hours on an endless loop, the sound of that monitor flatline, the look on my mother's face when she told me to stop making a scene, the click of her heels walking away. When I got home, Ethan's toys were still scattered across the living room, exactly where he'd left them that morning. His favorite stuffed dinosaur was on the couch, wearing the tiny doctor's coat I'd made for it last week. His sippy cup sat on the kitchen counter, still half full of juice. His little sneakers were by the door, one of them untied. I stood in the middle of the living room and realized I couldn't remember what his laugh sounded like anymore. It had been less than 12 hours since I'd heard it, and it was already fading, slipping away into the void where lost things go. That's when I felt something inside me change, not break. Breaking would have been too clean, too complete. This was more like a transformation. Like the moment a caterpillar dissolves inside its chrysalis. Everything that I was melting away to make room for something new. My phone buzzed. A text from Chloe. Mom says you're still being dramatic about today. Honestly, Lily, maybe if you'd been a better mother, this wouldn't have happened. Maybe if you'd taken better care of him, gotten him to the hospital sooner. But you've always been irresponsible. It's not surprising that your child paid the price for it. I read the message 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. Each time, the words burned deeper, carved themselves into places that would never heal. And that's when I felt it. That click, that cold, clear moment of absolute understanding. They would never acknowledge what they'd done to me. They would never apologize for abandoning me when I needed them most. They would never even admit they'd done anything wrong. But I could make them remember. I could make them feel. I could make them understand what it's like to lose everything while the people who are supposed to love you stand by and watch it happen. The funeral was 4 days later. I'd organized everything myself, made every decision alone. White casket, simple service. No elaborate flowers because I couldn't afford them. Not after maxing out my credit cards to pay for emergency room bills that insurance refused to cover. I'd called my parents to tell them about the arrangements. Eleanor had answered on the fifth ring, sounding irritated. Yes? The funeral is Thursday at 2, Grace Memorial Park. A pause. We'll see if we can make it. Bob has a golf tournament that morning. Mom, it's your grandson's funeral. And golf is very important for your father's business relationships. We'll try, Lily. That's all I can promise. They didn't come. I stood at that tiny grave with Maria beside me, the only person in the world who seemed to think my son's death mattered. The pastor spoke about heaven and God's plan and eternal rest, but the words just floated away on the November wind, meaningless and cold. I watched them lower that small white casket into the ground, and I felt something settle inside me, something hard and purposeful and patient. This wasn't over. This was just beginning. When I got home that evening, there were 3 texts from Chloe. Heard the funeral was today. Sorry we missed it. Mom and Dad asked me to check on you. Are you done with your pity party yet? Also, since you're clearly not using that emergency fund Mom and Dad set up for you, can I borrow from it? My Pilates studio needs new equipment. I didn't respond. I sat on my couch, surrounded by Ethan's things, and I started planning. The next several months passed in a strange blur. I went to work at my data entry job. I ate. I slept, when the nightmares allowed it. I existed in this gray space between living and dead, not quite one or the other. My parents didn't call. Not once. Not to check if I was okay, not to offer support, not even to criticize me for handling things wrong. I was simply erased from their narrative, a problem that had solved itself through silence. But Chloe called, often, always needing something. Can you send me $2,000? I have a business opportunity. Mom mentioned you got a small life insurance payout from Ethan. That's basically just sitting there, right? I could really use some of it. Why are you being so selfish? It's not like you need the money for anything now. He's dead. That last one arrived 6 months after the funeral. 6 months. She'd waited 6 whole months before saying that out loud. I sent her $5,000. She didn't even say thank you. Around this time, I changed jobs. I saw an ad for a position at Eternal Rest Funeral Home, and something about it felt right. Felt like where I needed to be. They hired me to arrange flowers and coordinate services, to be the calm voice on the phone when someone's world had just ended. I was good at it. Really good at it. Because I understood what those people were feeling in a way most funeral directors never could. I'd been there. I was still there. I watched family after family come through those doors. I saw mothers collapse over their children's caskets. I saw fathers who couldn't stop crying. I saw siblings who held each other and refused to let go. I saw love and pain and connection, all the things I'd never had with my own family. And each funeral, each family, each expression of genuine grief, it hardened something inside me, made that click louder, more insistent. My parents lived 6 miles away. Sometimes, on my drive home, I'd take the route that passed their house. I'd slow down, just a little, and look at the lights in the windows, the perfectly manicured lawn, the expensive cars in the driveway, the illusion of perfection they'd built and maintained so carefully. I'd imagine them inside, eating dinner, watching television, discussing Chloe's latest achievement, moving through their lives as if I'd never existed, as if Ethan had never existed. I started driving by more often, not stopping, never stopping, just looking, observing, learning their patterns. Bob played golf every Tuesday and Thursday morning. Eleanor had her book club on Wednesday evenings. They went to the same church every Sunday, sitting in the 3rd pew from the front, smiling and nodding and pretending to be good people. I learned that they told people I'd moved away. Lily relocated for work. Eleanor would say at church functions, "She's doing well, very independent." It was easier than explaining that they'd abandoned their daughter after their grandson's death. Easier than acknowledging I existed at all. 1 year passed, then a year and a half. Then, finally, 20 months after Ethan's death, my mother called. I was at work, arranging white roses for a child's funeral, when my phone rang. I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick up. "So you're still alive." Eleanor's voice, sharp as ever, no greeting. I wasn't sure. I didn't respond. Just waited. "Your father is sick. His heart. Don't make this into some dramatic thing. Just come over and help out. Chloe is too busy with her new restaurant venture." "What do you need help with?" My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Flat. Emotionless. Cooking. Cleaning. Making sure he takes his medication. The basic things. Can you manage that? Or is it too much to ask? Every fiber of my being wanted to hang up, to tell her to handle it herself, to feel what I felt when she walked away. But instead, I heard myself say, "When should I come?" "Tomorrow, 6 o'clock, don't be late." She hung up without saying goodbye, without saying please, without acknowledging that she was asking for help from the daughter she'd erased from her life. I finished arranging the roses, my hands steady despite the storm inside me. This was it. This was my chance. Not for reconciliation, not for forgiveness, for something else entirely. The next evening, I pulled into their driveway at exactly 6 o'clock. The house looked the same as it always had. Perfect, pristine, lifeless. Eleanor answered the door in a silk blouse and pressed slacks, as if she were receiving a guest for tea rather than her estranged daughter. "You're on time. Good, take your shoes off. I just had the floors cleaned." I stepped inside, and the smell hit me immediately. The same perfume Eleanor had worn for 30 years. The same furniture polish. The same air of forced perfection covering something rotten underneath. Bob was in his recliner in the living room, looking smaller than I remembered. His skin had a grayish tint, and there were pill bottles lined up on the side table, like tiny soldiers. He glanced up when I entered, his expression unreadable. "Didn't think you'd actually show up," he said. I met his eyes, and for the first time in my life, I didn't look away first. "Didn't think I'd survive either, did you?" His jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. Eleanor swept into the room, a list in her hand. "Here's what needs to be done. Dinner at 7. Nothing spicy, his stomach can't handle it. Medications at 8, with food. The prescriptions are on the counter. Kitchen needs cleaning after dinner. Floors need vacuuming. Bathroom needs fresh towels." She thrust the list at me, and I took it, scanning the items. 23 different tasks, written in her precise handwriting. "Chloe usually helps, but she's dealing with some important business decisions this week," Eleanor continued, "so you'll need to cover her duties too." "When was the last time Chloe was here?" I asked. Eleanor waved her hand dismissively. "That's not the point. The point is we need help, and you're available. I have a job. I'm sure you can rearrange your schedule. It's not like you have anything important going on." I folded the list carefully and put it in my pocket. "I'll be here tomorrow at 6. I'll stay for 2 hours. That's all." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. 2 hours isn't enough to... 2 hours, I repeated. "Or I don't come back." She looked like she wanted to argue, but Bob spoke up. "Fine, 2 hours." I made dinner that night. Baked chicken, steamed vegetables, brown rice. I cleaned the kitchen. I helped Bob take his medications, reading each label carefully, noting each dosage. Eleanor watched me the entire time, as if she expected me to poison something. When my 2 hours were up, I gathered my things and headed for the door. "You're leaving already?" Eleanor followed me. "There's more to do." I said 2 hours. "This is your father we're talking about. Your family." I turned to face her, my hand on the doorknob. "You stopped being my family the day you walked away from me in that hospital. This is just me returning the favor, one small piece at a time." Her face went white. "How dare you?" 6 o'clock tomorrow, I said, and walked out. I came back the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. Every evening, 6 to 8, I cooked and cleaned and helped with medications. I barely spoke. I didn't engage with their attempts at conversation. I just did the tasks and left. After a week, they stopped trying to make me stay longer. After 2 weeks, they stopped trying to talk to me at all. I became like a ghost in their house, present but invisible, necessary but unwelcome. And all the while, I watched. I listened. I learned. I learned that Bob kept a journal in his desk drawer, hidden under a stack of investment statements. I learned that Eleanor took sleeping pills every night, washing them down with wine despite the warning labels. I learned that Chloe hadn't visited in over 3 months, despite their constant mentions of how busy and important she was. I learned that they were afraid, not of dying, not of being sick, but of being alone, of being abandoned the way they'd abandoned others their entire lives. One night, about 3 weeks into my routine, Eleanor made a mistake. She'd had more wine than usual, and her filter slipped. I was washing dishes when she came into the kitchen, unsteady on her feet. "You know, you really should be grateful we even let you come here." I kept washing, didn't respond. Most parents wouldn't be so forgiving. Most parents would have cut you off completely after the way you embarrassed us at the hospital, making such a scene, forcing us to be part of your drama. My hands stilled in the soapy water. "And now you come here with this attitude, like you're doing us some enormous favor. You should be thanking us for giving you a purpose." For not completely writing you out of our lives. I turned off the water, dried my hands slowly on a dish towel, turned to face her. Do you remember what you said to me? My voice was quiet, but something in it made her take a step back. In that hospital hallway, do you remember? She blinked, trying to focus through the wine haze. I have no idea what. You said I was used to being alone, that I always figure things out. You said choices have consequences. I took a step toward her. But you never asked what choice I made that killed my son. What choice, specifically, caused a 3-year-old to die of meningitis? Eleanor's mouth opened, closed, opened again. That's not what I... Because the choice I made was calling you, asking for help, needing my mother. That was my mistake. That was the poor choice you were referring to. Thinking that my family would show up for me when it mattered. You're twisting my words. No, Mom, I'm finally understanding them. I set the dish towel down carefully on the counter. And you're right about one thing. I am used to being alone. You made sure of that. You trained me for 32 years to expect nothing from you, to need nothing from you, to be nothing to you. Eleanor was pressed against the refrigerator now, her earlier bravado evaporating. Why are you here then? If we're so terrible, why come back? I smiled, and I knew it didn't reach my eyes. I'm still figuring that out, but I think it has something to do with making sure you understand exactly what you did, making sure you feel it, the way you made me feel it. I walked past her, grabbed my bag, and headed for the door. Behind me, I heard her whisper, "You've changed." I stopped, looked back over my shoulder. No, Mom, I've just stopped pretending you might. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that journal in Bob's desk, about all the secrets it might contain, about whether the truth of who they really were might be even worse than what I already knew. The next evening, I arrived at 5:30 instead of 6. Traffic was light, I explained when Eleanor answered the door, looking surprised. Bob was napping in his recliner, light snores coming from his half-open mouth. Well, since you're early, you can start on the laundry, Eleanor said, heading upstairs to her bedroom. I have some calls to make. I nodded and waited until I heard her bedroom door close. Then I moved quickly to Bob's study, a small room off the living room that he'd always kept locked. But the key was where it had always been, on top of the doorframe, covered in years of dust. My hands shook as I unlocked the door. Inside, the study was dim, smelling of old paper and cigars. The desk was an antique mahogany monstrosity, covered in files and documents. And there, in the bottom drawer, exactly where I'd seen him put it, was the journal. I pulled it out, my heart pounding so loud I was sure someone would hear it. The leather cover was worn, the pages yellow with age. Some entries dated back 20 years. I started reading, and with each page, the floor beneath me seemed to tilt and shift. Bob's journal wasn't just a record of his days, it was a catalog of his schemes. Pages and pages detailing how he'd convinced elderly church members to invest in fake companies, how he'd borrowed money from neighbors with no intention of paying it back, how he'd stolen credit card numbers from clients at his accounting firm, how he'd embezzled from the youth baseball league he'd coached. The amounts were staggering. Hundreds of thousands of dollars, taken from people who'd trusted him, people who'd thought he was their friend. But it was the entries about me that made my blood run cold. Lily cost us $30,000 in wedding expenses, and she couldn't even make the marriage work. Waste of money, she owes us. Had to bail Lily out again today. Her car broke down. When will she learn to be more responsible with money? Starting to think we should have stopped at one child. Lily called, crying about needing help with the baby. She's always needing something. Eleanor was right. We should have discouraged her from having it. And then, the entry from 2 weeks after Ethan's death. Lily has a small life insurance policy on the child, $20,000. She'll waste it on rent and groceries like she wastes everything. Need to figure out how to convince her to invest it with me. Could turn that 20 into nothing real quick. She's too stupid to know the difference. The hospital bills will make her desperate enough to listen. This is her punishment for being such a burden all these years, for never living up to what we needed her to be. For having a child out of wedlock and embarrassing us in front of the church community. The boy dying is probably a blessing. Now she won't drag him down the way she's dragged us down her entire life. Eleanor suggested we cut her off completely, but I think there's more to be gained by keeping her around. Desperate people make poor decisions we can profit from. I read that entry 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. Each time, the words seemed to get clearer, sharper, more impossible to deny. My father had viewed my son's death as a business opportunity. My mother had wanted to cut me off completely. They hadn't come to the funeral because they were too busy planning how to steal from me. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and photographed every single page of that journal. Every scheme, every theft, every cruel word about me, every calculation about how to exploit my grief. It took me 40 minutes. When I was done, I carefully placed the journal back exactly where I'd found it, locked the study door, and returned the key to its hiding place. Then I went to the laundry room and started a load of towels like nothing had happened. Eleanor came down 20 minutes later. "You're quiet tonight." "Just focused on the work," I said, folding a towel with careful precision. She studied me for a moment, and I could see her trying to figure out if something had changed. "Your father's been feeling better lately. The doctor said his heart is improving." "That's good. We might not need you to come as often. Maybe 3 times a week instead of every day. Whatever works for you." She seemed disappointed by my lack of reaction, like she'd been hoping for me to argue, to beg to keep coming. "Well, we'll see how it goes." That night, I drove home and immediately backed up the photos from my phone to 3 different cloud accounts. Then I printed physical copies and put them in a safe deposit box at my bank. Then I emailed them to myself at 3 different email addresses. And then I sat down and made a list of every person whose name appeared in that journal. Every victim of Bob's schemes, 27 names in total, 27 people who'd been cheated, stolen from, lied to. 27 people who had no idea the man they'd trusted, the man who sang hymns in church every Sunday, was a con artist. I cross-referenced the names with public records, social media, and obituaries. 18 of them were still alive and living in the area. 18 people who deserved to know the truth. But I didn't send anything. Not yet. I had to be sure. Had to be certain this was what I wanted to do, because once I did this, there would be no going back. This would be the moment I chose revenge over reconciliation, justice over family, truth over the comfortable lie we'd all been living. I kept going to their house, kept cooking and cleaning and helping with medications. But now, everything was different. I watched them with new eyes, seeing them clearly for perhaps the first time in my life. I watched Bob joke with the mailman about the weather, knowing that mailman's mother-in-law was one of the names in the journal. $30,000, stolen over the course of 2 years. I watched Eleanor chat with her book club friends about their latest read, knowing she'd looked at her own grandson and decided his death was probably for the best. I watched Chloe call, demanding more money, more attention, more everything, while I stood invisible in the background like always. And I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no conflict. Just a cold, clear certainty about what needed to happen. 3 weeks later, Eleanor made her second mistake. I'd just finished making dinner, grilled salmon with asparagus. Bob had gone to bed early, his heart medication making him drowsy. Eleanor was on her second glass of wine, sitting at the kitchen counter while I cleaned up. "You know," she said, her words slightly slurred, "I was thinking about what you said, about the hospital." I kept washing dishes, but every nerve in my body went on high alert. "And I think you need to understand our perspective. We'd spent 32 years dealing with your drama, your bad decisions, your neediness. When that child got sick, it was just one more thing in a long line of things you'd failed at." I turned off the water, turned to face her. She continued, oblivious to the danger. "We couldn't spend our entire lives rescuing you from yourself. At some point, you have to face consequences. And honestly, Lily, that child was a consequence. He was a reminder of every poor choice you'd ever made. The man you chose, the life you chose, the person you chose to be." "Stop talking," I said quietly. She laughed. Actually laughed. "See? This is exactly what I mean. You can't handle the truth. You never could. You always wanted us to coddle you, to pretend everything you did was fine, but it wasn't fine. You weren't fine, and that child. If you say one more word about my son, I will walk out of this house and you will never see me again." Something in my voice finally got through to her. She stopped, her wineglass halfway to her lips. "But before I go," I continued, my voice steady and cold, "I want you to understand something. Everything that's about to happen to you, you earned it. Every single bit of it." Eleanor set down her glass, suddenly looking more sober. "What are you talking about?" "You'll find out soon enough." I grabbed my bag and walked toward the door. "Lily, wait." I didn't wait. I walked out of that house for what I knew would be the last time, and I didn't look back. That night, I composed 27 identical emails. No explanation. No accusations. Just a simple message. You deserve to know the truth about Bob Chen. Attached, you will find evidence of what he did to you and others. I'm sorry. You deserved better. Then I attached the relevant pages from the journal for each person. The entries that detailed exactly how Bob had stolen from them, lied to them, manipulated them. My finger hovered over the send button for a long time. This was it. The point of no return. Once I sent these emails, everything would change. The carefully constructed image my parents had built would crumble. The life they'd created through lies and theft and manipulation would end, and they would know I did it. They would know their invisible daughter, the one they'd dismissed and diminished and erased, had destroyed them. I thought about Ethan, about his laugh that I could barely remember, about the way he used to grab my face with both hands and say "Mama" like it was the most important word in the world, about how he'd never get to grow up, never get to have a life, because sometimes terrible things just happen to good people for no reason at all. I thought about that hospital hallway, about my mother's clicking heels walking away, about my father's video call with Chloe while my world ended, about them telling me I was used to being alone while my son's body was still warm in the room behind me. I thought about the journal entry. The boy dying is probably a blessing. I hit send. All 27 emails went out at once, at 11:43 p.m. on a Thursday night. Then I turned off my phone, poured myself a glass of whiskey even though I rarely drank, and waited for the world to catch fire. The first response came at 6:30 the next morning. A reply from one of the victims, a woman named Sandra Peterson, whose husband had died of a heart attack after discovering they'd lost their retirement savings to Bob's fake investment scheme. Thank you for sending this. I've been waiting 15 years for proof. I'm forwarding this to the police immediately. By 9 a.m., my phone was blowing up. Calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Voicemails from lawyers. Text messages from reporters. And nothing, absolutely nothing, from my parents. I let it all go to voicemail. I went to work, arranged flowers for a funeral, comforted a grieving widow, and felt nothing but calm. The police called that afternoon. Detective Martinez, Organized Crime Division. Could I come in to answer some questions about my father? I sent documents to some people who I believe were victims of fraud, I told him. What they choose to do with that information is up to them. Where did you get those documents? From my father's personal journal, which he kept in his unlocked desk in his home office. As his daughter, I had access to his house. I don't believe I've broken any laws. There was a long pause. Ma'am, are you aware that this could result in criminal charges against your father? I'm aware. And you sent these documents anyway? People deserve to know the truth, don't you think? Another pause. We'll be in touch. That evening, Eleanor called. 18 times. I didn't answer. Finally, she drove to my apartment and pounded on my door. I know you're in there, Lily. Open this door right now. I stood on the other side of the door, listening to her rage, and felt nothing. The police were here. They froze our bank accounts. They're talking about pressing charges. What did you do? I opened the door slowly. Eleanor stood there, her perfect composure completely shattered. Her hair was messy. Her makeup was smudged. She looked like she'd aged 10 years overnight. What did I do? I repeated softly. I told the truth. You had no right. I had every right. Those people deserve to know what he did to them. This will destroy us. Your father could go to prison. Do you understand that? I leaned against the doorframe, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. I understand perfectly. How could you do this? To your own family? I laughed then. Couldn't help it. My own family? Mom, you made it very clear I'm not part of your family. You made that decision in a hospital hallway while my son was dying. This? I gestured vaguely at the air between us. This is just me accepting what you told me. That I'm used to being alone. That I always figure things out. That I don't need you. Eleanor's face crumpled. For the first time in my entire life, I saw her cry. Real tears, not the performative kind she used at church functions. Please, you have to tell them it was a mistake. That you misunderstood what you read. It wasn't a mistake. Lily, please, I'm begging you, fix this. The way you fixed things for me? When I begged you to stay at the hospital? She grabbed my arms, her fingers digging in desperately. That was different. How? Because she couldn't finish. Couldn't find the words to explain how her abandonment was justified, but mine wasn't. I gently removed her hands from my arms. Go home, Mom. There's nothing more to say. I'll never forgive you for this. Good. Now you know how it feels. She left, and I closed the door behind her. Through the door, I heard her sobbing. heard her car start, heard her drive away, and I felt nothing but relief that it was finally over. The next few weeks were chaos. Bob was arrested and charged with fraud, embezzlement, and identity theft, 23 counts in total. The local news ran stories about the con man who fooled a whole community. Their house was seized as part of the asset forfeiture process. Their bank accounts were emptied to begin repaying victims. Chloe called me exactly once. "Are you happy now? Mom and Dad are destroyed because of you." "Where were you?" I asked. "When they needed help?" "I was busy. I have a life." "So do I. Had one. Before they decided I didn't matter." "You're a monster, Lily. Mom was right about you." "Probably," I agreed, and hung up. Eleanor called sporadically over the next month. The calls evolved from angry to desperate to something that almost sounded like understanding. I never answered, but I listened to the voicemails. "I know I wasn't there for you. I know I failed you. But destroying us won't bring him back." She was right. It wouldn't bring Ethan back. Nothing would. But it also didn't feel like destruction. It felt like justice. It felt like balance. It felt like making them understand, finally, what loss really means. 6 weeks after I sent those emails, I drove past their house. The for sale sign had been replaced with a seized by law enforcement banner. The lawn was overgrown. The windows were dark. I didn't feel triumphant. Didn't feel satisfied. Just felt tired. That's when my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize, but something made me answer. "Lily?" It was Maria, the nurse from the hospital. "I hope this isn't weird. I was just thinking about you, wondering how you're doing." I pulled over to the side of the road, surprised by the sudden tightness in my throat. "I'm okay. How did you get my number?" "You gave it to me. That night. You probably don't remember." We talked for an hour. She told me about her work, about the families she'd helped, about the rewards and sorrows of working with the dying. I told her about the funeral home, about finding purpose in helping others grieve. I didn't tell her about my parents, about what I'd done, but somehow, I think she knew anyway. "Sometimes," she said quietly, "the kindest thing we can do for ourselves is walk away from people who hurt us, even if they're family. Especially if they're family." "What if walking away isn't enough?" I asked. "What if they need to understand what they did?" There was a long pause. "Then I hope you find peace with whatever you need to do." After we hung up, I sat in my car for a long time, watching the sun set behind the mountains, and I realized that revenge hadn't brought me peace. It had brought me justice, yes. It had brought me satisfaction, yes. But peace? That was still out of reach, because the truth was, I wasn't done yet. 3 months after the emails, Eleanor showed up at the funeral home where I worked. She looked different, older, smaller, worn down by the weight of consequences. "Can we talk?" she asked. I led her to my office, a small room in the back filled with flower catalogs and sympathy cards. We sat across from each other, the silence heavy between us. "Your father took a plea deal," she said finally. 5 years. He'll be eligible for parole in 3. I nodded but said nothing. We lost the house. I'm living in a 1-bedroom apartment on the east side, working at a call center. I'm 63 years old, and I'm answering phones for minimum wage. "I'm sorry," I said, and surprisingly, I meant it. Not sorry that it happened, but sorry that it had to happen. Sorry that they'd made choices that led to this moment. "Are you?" Eleanor looked up at me, her eyes red-rimmed and tired. "Because Lily, you destroyed us. You took everything. Was it worth it?" "Do you remember what you said to me, at the hospital?" "I said a lot of things I regret. You said my son dying was my punishment for bad choices, that I was used to being alone, that I'd figure it out like I always do." I leaned forward. "Did you mean those things? Or were they just convenient to say in the moment?" Eleanor was quiet for a long time. "I don't know," she finally whispered. "I think I was afraid. Bob and I, we'd built our whole lives on this image of perfection. And you were always the thing that didn't fit. The reminder that we weren't perfect. When your son got sick, when you needed us, it forced us to confront all the ways we'd failed. And instead of facing that, we just left." "You didn't leave," I corrected her. "You abandoned me. There's a difference." "I know. Do you? Because here you are, 3 months later, and the first thing you talked about was what happened to you and Dad. Not about what you did to me, not about Ethan. Not about the fact that your grandson died and you skipped his funeral to play golf." Eleanor flinched like I'd slapped her. "I think about him every day." "No, you don't. You think about how his death inconvenienced you, how it exposed the cracks in your perfect life. But you don't think about him. You never knew him. You never tried. You're right. Eleanor's voice broke. You're absolutely right. And I don't know how to fix that. I don't know how to fix any of this. I stood up. You can't. That's what you don't understand. Some things, once broken, stay broken. You taught me that. So that's it? You're just going to let your father go to prison? Let me lose everything and feel nothing? I walked to the door, opened it. I feel plenty, Mom. I feel grief for the son I lost. I feel anger for the mother I never had. I feel peace for finally understanding that I deserved better than what you gave me. I paused. What I don't feel is guilty. She stood, picked up her purse, paused at the door. I did love you, Lily. I just didn't know how to show it. That's not love, Mom. That's just regret that you got caught. She left, and I watched her walk to her old sedan, a far cry from the Mercedes she used to drive. Part of me wanted to call her back, to find some way to bridge the impossible gap between us. But the larger part, the part that had been built from grief and abandonment and survival, knew it was too late for that. The months continued to pass. Bob went to prison. Eleanor faded into obscurity. Chloe moved to California and changed her last name, trying to escape the scandal. And I stayed at the funeral home, helping strangers through their worst days, finding purpose in their pain. On the first anniversary of Ethan's death, I visited his grave alone. The tiny headstone looked too small to contain all the love and grief I still carried. I'd brought a single white lily, his favorite flower. I made them understand, I whispered to the stone. I made them feel what they made us feel. I don't know if that makes me a good person or a bad person. I don't know if it was justice or just revenge. But baby, I couldn't let them forget you. I couldn't let them pretend it didn't matter. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of freshly cut grass and distant rain. I imagined it was Ethan, telling me it was okay, telling me he understood. But I knew that wasn't true. How could he understand? He'd been 3 years old. He'd known nothing but love and safety and the belief that his mother could protect him from everything. He'd never known that sometimes protection isn't enough, that sometimes terrible things happen anyway, that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you most will walk away when you need them. I stayed at his grave until sunset, watching the sky turn orange and purple and finally dark. And when I finally stood to leave, I realized I wasn't alone. Maria was standing a few feet away, holding her own small bouquet of flowers. I hope I'm not intruding, she said softly. I came by every year, to remember him, to make sure someone did, even if his family didn't. Something inside me cracked open then. Not broke, just opened. Let in a little light. Thank you, I managed to say. We stood together in the growing darkness, 2 women connected by grief and the memory of a little boy who deserved so much more than he got. Are you okay? Maria asked eventually. I thought about that question, really thought about it. Was I okay? I'd destroyed my parents' lives. I'd exposed their crimes. I'd watched them lose everything and felt no remorse. By any conventional measure, I should feel terrible about that. But I didn't. I think I will be, I said. Someday. Good. Maria squeezed my hand. He'd want that for you. After she left, I stood alone in the cemetery one last time, and I made a decision. I'd spent months making my parents pay for what they'd done. I'd achieved my goal. They understood now. They felt what I felt. The debt, in whatever twisted way, was paid. But staying in this town, working at this funeral home, driving past their old house, living in the shadow of everything that had happened that wasn't freedom, that was just a different kind of prison. The next week, I gave my notice at work. I packed up my small apartment. I said goodbye to Maria, and I moved to a small town on the Oregon coast that I'd visited once as a child and never forgotten. I found a job at a tiny flower shop near the harbor, run by an elderly woman named Rose, who asked no questions about my past. The smell of the ocean was different from anything I'd known before. Sharp and clean and endless. I rented a cottage with blue shutters and a view of the water. I learned the names of the seagulls that visited my porch every morning. I taught myself to bake bread. I read books I'd always meant to read. I existed without the weight of vengeance pressing down on every breath. I didn't give my parents my new address. I changed my phone number. I deleted my social media accounts. I became, in a way, what my mother had always wanted me to be. Gone. But not erased, not forgotten, just free. Sometimes, late at night, I wondered if I'd done the right thing, if destroying my parents to honor my son made me noble or monstrous. If justice and revenge were the same thing or opposite things or just different words for the same wound, I never came to a satisfying answer. What I did know was this: I'd survived. I'd taken the worst thing that could happen to a person and I'd transformed it into something else. Not healing, not recovery, but survival. And sometimes, that's enough. On the second anniversary of Ethan's death, I walked down to the beach at sunrise. The water was gray and cold, waves crashing against the rocks with relentless rhythm. I held a white lily, the same as always, and I spoke to my son across the distance between life and death. I don't know if I'm a good person. I told him. I don't know if what I did was right, but I know I'm still here. I'm still fighting. I'm still trying to find some way to make your short life mean something. A seagull landed near me, bold and curious. I broke off a piece of the muffin I'd brought and tossed it over. The bird caught it mid-air and flew off, disappearing into the fog. I made them remember you, I said. Even if it was the wrong way, even if it makes me someone you might not be proud of. They know you existed. They know you mattered. That has to count for something. The sun broke through the clouds then, just for a moment, painting the water gold. I stood up, placed the lily on the sand where the tide would take it, and walked back toward my cottage. Back toward the life I was building from the wreckage of the old one. Back toward whatever future I could create from the ashes of revenge and grief and survival. Behind me, the waves erased my footprints one by one, until it was as if I'd never been there at all. But I had been there. I was still here. And that, I realized as I opened the door to my blue-shuttered cottage, to my new life, to my freedom, that was enough. Because sometimes the only way to honor those we've lost is to refuse to lose ourselves. Sometimes justice isn't about making them pay. It's about finally walking away from what destroys you. So tell me, have you ever had to choose between family and freedom? Between staying silent and speaking your truth? Drop a comment below. Hit that subscribe button if you believe in the power of walking away from what destroys you. And like this video if you know that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is simply refuse to carry their weight anymore.